Obsidian wants you to pay $90 to play Avowed a couple of days early. But let's be real, you're not paying for early access, you're paying to be a beta tester. They're charging you to find bugs and suffer through their unfinished game. This is just another example of how bad modern AAA gaming is. Make the players do the work, charge them for it, and call it an early access. Let's break it down.
People don't like you very much, do they?
Reviews for Avowed started pouring in on February 13th, and the internet is divided on this game, which really isn't a surprise considering that this is the studio behind the divisive Outer Worlds. But amongst all the division, there is a trend amongst people's opinions, and that is that the game is a buggy mess. On paper, this game should be fantastic. A game made by a studio who made one of my favorite games of all time, Fallout New Vegas, set in an awesome world in the Pillars of Eternity universe. But as we all know, most of these big studios aren't what they once were. Of all of the reviews and first impression videos that I watched, none were more damning than Luke Stevens' video.
It's one of the most broken games I've ever had the displeasure of trying to finish for a review in a long time, maybe ever.
First, Luke started off by saying how sad he was to have to be making this review because he thought the game was genuinely good and fun. But some of the things he brings up in his review should, 1, serve as a warning to players wanting to purchase early access, and 2, make us skeptical of buying the game when it releases until it's fixed. First, Avowed by most estimations is a crisp, cool 30 to 50 hours to finish the game. Honestly, that's nice to hear. So many of these RPGs are overbloated and just full of boring side quests, so it's cool to hear that it's a little bit more condensed. But Luke states in his review that his playthrough was an additional 12 to 15 hours because of how many times he had to replay areas he had already finished, how often he was getting soft locked out of the game, quests weren't triggering properly, and that he had to deal with corrupted save files.
We're gonna do a live demo. You ready? Here we are in the main menu. I'm gonna hit enter. Are you ready? Enter, ready? Here we go. There we go. Okay, and I'm gonna hit enter to continue. Watch what happens. Boop. It starts to load in. Okay, there we go. And crash. I don't know, dude. It's crazy.
But what's worse, and what has me feeling particularly surly today, is that he wasn't allowed to show any of the footage of these issues because they took place in late game, and these areas were barred from being included in reviews. Come on, people, wake up. This is Cyberpunk 2077 all over again. The parts they showed us seemed great, but once you peeked behind that curtain, it was all a busted mess. Luke continued by saying performance was bad, frame drops were terrible, some companions would be moving at like 15 frames per second while everything else was moving at 60 frames per second. But Obsidian told him,
quote, "You cannot show any footage beyond what has been provided as B-roll by PR.
That's Corpo speak for you have to show the stuff that makes us look competent even if we aren't. This deceptive bullshit is one of the things that's killing the modern video games industry and is deteriorating players' trust with both studios and games journalism. It's a shame that reviewers can't even properly inform consumers about the game without fear of retaliation from the studio. If you don't paint them in a good light, you could get in trouble, and that pisses me off. Anyways, Luke continues by saying he thinks it's a good game when it works, but it doesn't work, and so therefore he can't recommend it. But Luke's review isn't the only review that's got me feeling extra skeptical. mr.matty plays, longtime Obsidian fanboy.
But for me, they have been always one of the best ever RPG developers.
His review has me concerned as well. Although his review is far less scathing, I would have expected him to absolutely love this game based on his track record. He called it a good game, but that's it, just a good game.
Avowed is a good game. Avowed is just a good game though, but I don't look at Obsidian for good games. I think they can deliver some of the best games ever, for me at least. So
he criticized its character-based reactivity, saying that it was nonsensical at times. He even gave an example of how he burned down one of his companions' homes and they didn't really seem to care. And by the end of the game, by the last mission, they said they were with him till the end. It's hard not to contrast That to something like Baldur's Gate 3, where your entire party makeup can be different depending on the choices you make. Party members will leave if they feel like their goals don't align with yours, if you go against their desires, or hell, you can just straight up cut them out of your party, literally. And honestly, world reactivity at this point is just table stakes for a modern RPG. Matty kept contrasting Avowed to Outer Worlds, which is a more apples to apples comparison, considering it's the same studio. And in his opinion, Outer Worlds came out on top. And for me, as someone who thought that Outer Worlds was pretty mid, that's concerning. Doesn't inspire great confidence. It's not a great sign. And it's not just Matty. There's another review. Surprisingly, I was able to glean some sort of useful information out of an IGN review. Too many bears. The reviewer says bears were everywhere, even when it didn't make sense. They even highlighted one instance that was particularly weird, in which they were going into a bandit camp and bears were just like huddled around the fire. Are we supposed to believe that bandits are taming bears in the living lands? Maybe there are just some lore implications that we don't understand yet. And while that might just be IGN going for the memes, I think it speaks to a larger concern, a lack of enemy variety. But in a game that only takes 30 to 50 hours to complete, which is relatively short by RPG standards, it feels disheartening to hear that there is a lack of enemy variety. How can you get sick of your enemies with only 30 hours of gameplay? That's crazy to me. There's definitely not enough. So here's my advice. Don't buy the game in early access. Don't pay extra so that you can discover bugs for Obsidian. Don't fall victim to the hype. It's such a deceptive, predatory practice to make you pay extra just for a few days more with the game. It just doesn't make sense. And honestly, don't buy the game at launch either. Even if the studio commits to fixing all the bugs that players have uncovered for them, there is not enough time between now and when the game officially launches to do anything about it. So my suggestion is wait. Wait until there's been a patch. Read the patch notes, be an informed consumer, and decide for yourself. And I know that this video may seem all doom and gloom on Avowed, but in reality, I am excited for this game. I do want to play this game. Like I mentioned, I love Fallout New Vegas. I think at times Obsidian is great, but until they resolve these problems, until they do right by the players, I think I'll be staying away. Anyways, drop a like, sub for more, and as always, stay skeptical, fight the power. Peace.